From Jawaharlal Nehru University is here. There is some brief introduction that I have an intention to introduce the Professor Rajan Kumar sir. He is a professor in Russian studies, Russian and Central Asian studies of School of International Studies of Jawaharlal Nehru University. Professor Rajan has the wider experience in the field of international relations, in the study of international relations, especially in the politics and society in Russia, Central Asia and Baltic studies. His research interest is in the field of India's foreign policy, international politics, and as well as the research methodology. He has a wider range of experience in terms of teaching various courses in research methodology. He has taught the American government courses in JNU. In terms of his project and the research work, he has done the various projects sponsored by Indian Council of Social Science Research and has the wider experience of the organizational and institutional and regional organization, especially the BRICS. Now, I wish a great success ahead. Let us listen to this. Let us listen to our Professor Rajan Kumar sir. Please do come. Before lecture, I will invite Professor Asmar Beg sir for a felicitation with the memento. Thank you so much, sir. Please do.
ऊपर नीचे कैसे होता है? अच्छा इस ओके. Hi, good morning. I hope all of you can hear me. Yeah. Good morning, sir. Professor Asmar Beg, sir. He has been very kind, and this is the second time he has invited me. I remember the first time he asked me to speak on G20, and that was when India was hosting the summit in 2023. And this is the second time that I'm here. So I'm extremely grateful to you, sir. Rahat Hassan Sahab, thank you very much. You've been really kind for giving me this opportunity and privilege. I consider it an honor and privilege that I'm speaking in front of all of you. Most of you research scholars, but some of you faculty here. I don't know all the names. And Dr. Alam, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, Dr. Alam, yeah. So Dr. Alam, thank you for a very generous introduction. Today, I have been asked to speak on, as you can see on the slide, conceptualizing post-Western world order. And it was extremely interesting to me. The title was very interesting that, some university in India is thinking about post-colonialism and emerging world order. That was the broader title of the conference. So when Professor Beg asked me that, would you like to speak, I was very excited. Although it was clashing, my time was clashing with some other program. But the moment sir asked me that, the title was so enticing, sir, that I wanted to say yes. But again, the date was clashing, so initially I said, sir, you have to excuse me this time. But again, sir gave me the second date, and it was Sunday, so it was not clashing with any other place. So I said, yes, sir, I'll be happy to speak on it. So this is something which is close to my heart and which I think I understand pretty okay, this concept. So I'll be speaking about this, what you call conceptualizing the post-Western world, and I'll take the frame which is post-colonial framework. So when you talk about the concept, the concepts associated concepts, one is mic working? My mic? Yeah, all right. So there are three associated concepts here. First is Western, The second is world order, and third is post-Western. So because when you're speaking on the post-Western world order, so essentially you have to understand first what is West, what is Western. The second is what is world order, and, and the third is what is post-Western. So the three associated concepts about which I'll be speaking today. Uh, so the first, if I ask you Western, so what do you think by the West? The broader West, if I ask you, what is West? What is West? Anybody would like to intervene, say something? What is West? When somebody says West, what do you mean by the West? Europe and Europe and America, essentially North America and Europe. That's what you mean by the West, right? So that's a geographical definition of West. But when we talk about West, it's not just the geography that matters. It's not the geography which is important. Uh, what isn't? Sorry, liberties, liberal order, liberal international order. We'll come to that. Yeah, development. But development has taken place in other places also. But we'll not call that West. For instance, Japan, for Australia, we'll not call that West, right? All right. So geographical. All right, so let's come back to some academic discipline here, this academic order. You might have heard the name Edward Said, who wrote a beautiful book, and all of you should read it as a student of political science. And also, if you're not a student of political science, this book is must, because this is considered to be one of the pioneers of what you call post-colonialism. So the West is not just a geographical entity, it is a cultural and ideological construct. So it's not just the territory or the geography that matters, it's a cultural and ideological construct. And the name of the book is Orientalism. So how the idea of Orient was essentially created by the West. And the way West thought of Orient was completely different from what we see in the Orient. So that was the idea propounded by Edward Said in his book Orientalism. So these are the broader features of what you call it West or Western. The first and the most important is the West as a construct of power and knowledge. The way the West constructed itself vis-a-vis Orient, so it says that it projected itself as a center for power, technology, knowledge, etc. So the West projects itself as rational, progressive, civilized, in contrast to the Orient. Orient means the East, which is irrational, backward, exotic, and inferior. So you see the contrast here. The contrast is that you're projecting something as superior. There is a hierarchy, and that hierarchy is one is better than the other. All right. So that's the construct of the West. The West as the subject and the Orient as a passive object. The West presents itself as a universal subject who will describe, will make laws, and the other part or the rest or the Orient, they are expected to follow the rules made by the West. The third important feature of what you call West is the West is also an ideological category. It's an ideological category to justify what? Justify colonial rule in the past, cultural domination even today, and political intervention. What happens in Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, etc. So you justify that political intervention even today because you think what is West should be universally applied in terms of political rights, liberty, liberalism, etc. The West in relation to the Orient is a place of romance, exotic beings, haunting memories, landscape, remarkable experiences. Always the Orient or the East is presented as something which is very romantic, which means you are very emotional, not very rational. So you are being contrasted with something which is rational, which is progressive, and you are somebody who is exotic, who very romantic, very emotional. So you are considered essentially inferior. Do not think that you are being considered superior to the Western idea. One important concept even propounded by Edward Said is that the West is not monolithic. West is not monolithic means West is not just one. In West also you have certain contest of ideas, and there are people who do not agree to what is projected as the West. For instance, even the idea of socialism that emerged in the Western country, but the West will not identify itself with socialism, right? Karl Marx was not from Russia or from India or China. Karl Marx was a German, who lived in UK, and the ideas spread to Germany and later on to Russia. But West will not identify itself with the idea of socialism. Right? The West identifies itself with the idea of what you call capitalism, not socialism. Yeah. So that's what we broadly refer to when we talk about West in the post-colonial framework. So that's the West that you need to understand. And post-colonial scholars, they challenge post-colonial scholars. Starting from Edward Said, Dipesh Chakravarti, or Gayatri Spivak. Many of the scholars have been influenced by the French school of Foucault, Derrida, etc. So they challenge the Western epistemology and its claim to universalism. They do not agree to the Western liberal universalism. And they, for instance, Gayatri Spivak, she talks about the what do you call the Can the Subaltern Speak? That's the title of the paper. So can subaltern here means the countries which are not from the West. Anyway, now I'm coming to the proper international relations. What is Western world order? Because my title was Western and post-Western world order. So the second important concept is when you talk of the Western order in the mainstream international relations literature, it refers to roughly 200 years of world history. I'm taking from 1789, the French Revolution, till late 20th century and also early 20th and 21st century. So Western world order refers to that period starting from French Revolution and until what you may call it today also. And there are three types of ideas. French Revolution is again a very liberating, emancipatory kind of idea which is being projected, but that is for the internal European country. That's exactly the period when you see just after a few years, colonialism is being established in different parts of the world by European countries. So what you see, democracy, equality, liberty for the European countries themselves, but at the same time you see colonialism and massive exploitation of resources from the third world countries or the colonial states. So by Western, we mean a Westphalian world order in which territorial sovereignty, nationalism, popular rights, secularism, and political and civic rights, these all constitute what you call the Westphalian order that broadly started in the 18th, 19th, and early 20th century. Capitalism, as I said, is integral to the Western order. It is different that socialism has also originated in the West, but the West will not identify with socialism. Western order means not the socialist order. Socialist order would mean either Soviet order or today Chinese order or Cuban order. So West is not interested in that socialism. West is interested essentially in capitalism. But also there are two caveats, two qualifications that you need to keep in mind when you talk about the Western world order. Because some of the people say that is it really a Western order? Because India has its own system, China has its own system, Brazil, Latin America, many countries in Africa, they have their own system. So to consider today's order, or even say 50 years earlier, to consider that this is the Western world order, that would be problematic, and many of the people have argued against it. For instance, there is a scholar from Brazil called Oliver Stenkel. He believes that to say that this is a Western world order, that itself is a very Eurocentric kind of concept. That idea comes because we have started believing in the Western concept, which has been propagated by the West itself. So that's the caveat that you need to keep in mind. Second, some of the people say that can you use West and the non-West as conceptual categories to analyze international politics? Because they're not homogeneous, as I said, they're not monolithic. And when you say I'm looking from the global South perspective, so is there just one global South? Is China same as India global South or Brazil, South Africa, Latin America? So how can you use that as conceptual category? That's a real challenge, and that all of us are facing. I'll try to answer some of the questions towards the end, but I cannot claim that I'm very successful, or any scholar for that matter cannot claim to be very successful so far as creating categories or using these West and non-West as analytical categories are concerned. Now, coming to the post-Western, because that's the crux, that's the main theme of my presentation today. So what is post-Western? When we say post-Western, so there are certain assumptions in mind when Professor Beg prepared this post-colonialism and post-Western world order. So he must be having few assumptions in mind. And what are those assumptions? Those assumptions, and I agree to most of them. Let me tell you, sir, I agree to that idea. These assumptions are the West is undergoing a perpetual and irreversible decline. Perpetual and irreversible decline. So what you have seen in the last 200 years, the way you have seen the West, the way you have understood the West, that is not going to be the same in the next 50 to 100 years. And I'll give you some concrete figures that how the West is going to look completely different from what we see today. So the West is undergoing a perpetual and irreversible decline. That's one of the assumptions when people talk about the post-Western order. The second important concept is the rise of the West is inevitable. When you say the West is declining, and when you talk of the post-Western order, which also means that you tend to believe that the rest, non-West, will continue to rise for a very long time. That may or may not be the case, but assumption is there that the rest will continue to rise. The third is the existing order is a byproduct of Western dominance in general and American hegemony in particular. Western dominance till World War II in general, UK, France, Germany, etc., the dominant power. But after the post-World War, America became the most dominant power, and European countries started following some disciplines and some order from what you call American hegemony. So that's one of the third assumption. Fourth assumption, it also kind of believes that the gravity of trade and global activity is shifting from the West to the East. The countries which are rising today, the countries are mostly the countries of the East and countries of the non-West. Also, there is an assumption that countries such as India, China, Brazil, Nigeria, South Africa, they will continue to grow in the coming years. So these are the assumptions, and you are very valid if you tend to question any of the assumptions. They are just the assumptions. Does not mean they are true or false. But whatever assumption you take, you have to support with the concrete facts. If you say that West is going to decline, you have to argue very convincingly that why do you argue that? What are the facts and figures? What are the empirical evidences to suggest that kind of assumption? If you say that India and China will continue to rise, you will have to give certain data to substantiate your argument. So all these assumptions are subject to testing depending on the data that you have. I'll give you some of the data which might be useful for you in building up your argument, and if you're constructing your theory. I think somebody said that he said, Saib, your name? Savage. Savage says that during the conversation he said that he is trying to build a theory. He has worked for his PhD on globalization and its consequences, and he is trying to build some theories on globalization. So these are the assumptions you will have to keep in mind when you talk about the globalization, and support with the data when you talk about the different types of globalization which are emerging. World order, what we call it, world order, again an important concept, and the question is who governs the world? Who or what governs the world? In my view, states, domestic states play the most important role in governance, but our focus is, in this lecture today, I'll not be focusing on the governance of the state because we are talking about international politics, so my focus, my level of analysis would be international system, so which essentially refers to interstate relationship. In IR, world order essentially refers to a broader stability which relies on a system of rules and institutions constituted through bilateral and multilateral negotiations and agreements. Governance relies on international rules ensured through institutions like United Nations, which makes the rule for different subjects. IMF, as you know, for financial issues, World Bank again for developmental issues, WTO, for instance, for trade-related issues. So these are the institutions which are making laws for the global governance. So world order essentially refers to the rules and the order which is created by these institutions with part of the international multilateral agreements. Now, a few postulates about the evolving world order, and again, these postulates are subject to the kind of data that you have. The West, some of the scholars argue that the West will remain a dominant player. Many of the scholars from the West and also from the other country, they do not necessarily agree that the West will completely disappear, and the rest will start dominating in the next few years. Second set of scholars, some of the scholars argue that the West will become irrelevant. The third is that the non-West Western countries, they will replace the West and create a new world order. Fourth, and Amitabh Acharya, this is not my view, sir, this is Amitabh Acharya's argument, and he's coming today, somebody told me, so tomorrow or whenever he speaks, he'll be talking about in detail. There'll be a political and cultural multipolarity, because Amitabh Acharya is from the constructivist school, essentially. So he will argue that he does not believe in realism, so he'll not talk about just the multipolarity, which is about power distribution. He'll talk about cultural multipolarity. So that's the argument that you're going to hear. And I'll also expand some of the arguments in the coming slide. And capitalism, some of the people argue that capitalism, the way we see it today, will not remain a dominant feature. But many of the people say that capitalism will remain a dominant feature even in the coming years. New institutions like BRICS, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, G20, etc., they will become much more important vis-a-vis existing institutions like IMF, World Bank, and other organizations that you have with the UN. So these are the few postulates about the evolving world order. And now let me support with some of the data. Because if you see that, if I say that the West is declining, and I do say that West is declining without any doubt, I'm not of the school which believes that West is not declining. There are few scholars who argue that West is not declining at all. The West has amazing adaptation power, and it will adapt to the new world. But I believe, and I'll argue with the help of data, that how the West is declining, and the data is here. If you compare G7 country with the E7, E7 means emerging, evolving 7 countries, emerging 7 states. So let me tell you, in the next 25 years, 6 of the 7 largest economies are projected to be emerging economies in 2050. By 2050, 6 of the 7, out of 7, 6 of the largest economies will not be the G7 economies. They'll be from the E7 economies. And what are the E7 economies? E7 economies would include, of course, China, India, Indonesia, Brazil, Mexico, Nigeria, Turkey, Russia, if you include. So these are the countries which will be the 6 out of 7 major economies by 2050. And you are only 25 years away from there. By the time you start teaching and you are of my age, this E7 will be the major deciding economy of the world, not the G7 that we have seen or what Sir has seen. Yeah. So you are going to focus on E7 and not necessarily the G7. But please remember, European Union share by 2050 would be less than 10% of the global economy. You get it? I'm talking about the entire European Union, 27 states together. They will constitute only 10% of the global economy. That's it. So that should be the influence that European Union can have economically on the international system. Am I saying just without any? This is not my data. This is PwC consultancy. PwC data. This is called power. What is the full form? PricewaterhouseCoopers. Yeah. So that's the PwC data. And also I've checked it with Ernst Young and other projecting consulting agencies. They also project this. So largely, they can be relied upon, because I've seen the projections when the BRICS projection was given by the Goldman Sachs, etc. So it continued to work for a very long time, and we agreed to that, and they came to be largely true. So so this is the figure that you get it. UK could be in the top 10 economies. UK will remain, but France would be out, and Italy will not be even the top 20 economies of the world by 2000. Just 25 years. When you become my age, that's what I'm saying. There is a consensus on decline of Europe in particular, but the decline of the West is a contested idea. So what I'm saying is that you see the economic decline of Europe, but West will still remain important because of certain reasons that I'll give you just now. And now, whenever in international politics, we tend to ignore the demography as a factor. But if you look at the demography of the way the world is going to grow in the next 25, 50 years, so this will give you the real picture of the world. And sometimes I believe that international politics should take into account demography as a factor, population as a factor. Why? Because look at the population. By 2075, 50 years down the line, and many of you would be there, so India will be the largest, India will be the biggest country in terms of population, and it would be 167 crore or something, something like that. China will come down drastically to 93, this 934,000 million in millions, 93 crores. So that will be the figure. United States around 40 crores. Indonesia 31. Indonesia, see the Indonesia 31 crore. Pakistan. Pakistan will surpass United States and it will be 46 crore. Population of Pakistan would be 46 crore. Nigeria. Nigeria important. Nigeria would be 44 crore by 2075. And Brazil again 19 crores by. If you go to by the end of the century, because we are also talking about the future, by the end of the century, the population you can see 150 crore India, China will come down to 63 crore only, and see the Pakistan would be closer, 51 crore Pakistan, 62 crore China. Just imagine see the difference, the way we are bridging the gap, and the way the rest or other countries are bridging the gap is very important. Indonesia 51 crore, Indonesia 29 crore, Pakistan 51, Nigeria 47, and Brazil 16 crore. So that would be the distribution of population, productive population, what I'm talking about. So the world is going to look completely different from what you see today when you talk of the coming years in the future. And I'm talking not too long, I'm talking of foreseeable future, which is 20-25 years, but little more and everything changes the way you see it today. Now economy is important, because if I say the West is declining and if I say that the rest is rising, so I have to support with the data, and this is the data which I use, and this is not my data taken from IMF, but again projected by PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, that organization, and also Ernst Young, etc. Others have also predicted on the similar lines. China is at 2016 in terms of purchasing power parity, PPP, not in constant prices, but in terms of purchasing power parity, China became number one. And by 2050, China will be number one even in the constant power pricing, etc. US, in terms of PPP, Indian economy would be number two, 2050. Number three would be United States. Number four would be Indonesia. By 2050, Indonesia would be, in terms of purchasing power parity, fourth important economy. Then Brazil, Russia, Mexico, Japan, Germany, and UK. So that would be the distribution of economy by 2050, which is just 25 years down the line. So and see the size here. In 1995, the E7 was half the size of G7. E7 country that I said in 1995, 30 years before, it was half the size of G7. By 2050, it almost became similar, comparative in terms of PPP. By 2040, the E7 countries will be double the size of G7 in terms of purchasing power parity. All right. So this is the data that we're talking about. This is the figure that supports the two assumptions that I made first. The first assumption was that the West is declining. So G7, as you can see, in terms of population, in terms of economy, there is a constant decline. And also when I say that the rest is rising, other countries are rising. So this is the figure, how emerging economies will become double the size of G7 economies by 2040. And that's not very distant, only 15-20 years, right, from now. All right, and just for the people who are visual here, so you can visualize how the economy will look like. So United States will remain important by 2050. Let's not dismiss the fact that because of his demography, because of his economic size, unless until Trump does a massive damage to his economy, he is trying his best to damage the American influence. Let me tell you, yesterday also he made a statement that why Google and other companies, tech companies, are recruiting people from India. That was a specific statement, that they should stop recruiting people from India. You know what is going to happen? People like you who wanted to dream and become an American citizen, so that desire, ambition will disappear now. Now, you may go to United States, but it's very likely that you will not settle down there, because the kind of policies which are being pursued America is going to be very different from the way we have seen America, right? Most of people wanted to go to America to study, but also to settle down there because of facilities, because of innovation, because of salary, because of comfort, and also because of some liberal ideas which used to rule the American politics. But now anti-immigration sentiment has become so strong in America that not many people would like to live there. All right, so that's a challenge. Now coming to the liberal international order, somebody pointed out in the beginning that what is the West without the liberal international order? All right, the West is identified with what you call liberal international order. So what is happening to the liberal international order? How much time I have for this lecture? All right. So I'll finish the liberal international order and then, yeah. All right. So liberal international order, what we see today that, the liberal international order is fading away. It is becoming largely not so important the way it used to be in the last 30 years. After the decline of the Soviet Union, after the disintegration of the Soviet Union, after what you saw the unipolar moment which emerged with the rise of America, the liberal international order became the most important philosophy in the last 30 years. But unfortunately, that is disappearing. Why? Because the very pillars on which the liberal international order depended, those pillars are cracking up. Those pillars are not there to support the liberal international order. So So what is happening that capitalism, as I said, capitalism legitimizes itself through growth and innovation. Liberal international order, let me tell you, it rested on the broader idea of capitalism, and capitalism survived on two things. The strongest logic of capitalism is what? That it is very innovative compared to socialism, and there has to be constant growth uh, for capitalism to be sustainable. Unfortunately, what is happening today that the capitalism is not leading to growth. Instead of that, what we are seeing today that growing inequality, disparity, environmental crisis. So the capitalism as a mode of production, capitalism as a system, that has come under crisis because people, younger people like you, they have started questioning because when you do not get employment, when there is no growth in the economy, I doubt whether you will stick to capitalism for even 5 years. So that's exactly what is happening with capitalism, that there are crises emerging because of unemployment, inequality, environmental concerns, and those features and those concerns are eroding the legitimacy of capitalism in many parts of the world. Even in US, in New York, the mayor who is going to win the election, if he is not pushed away from America. So you can see how the idea of capitalism is being contested in the heart of the city. I'm talking about Mamdani, the mayor election. So that is being contested at the core of New York is the core of capitalism, right? New York, London, Tokyo, these are the cities which kind of demonstrate the idea of capitalism. But those cities are being challenged by alternative ideas which are not capitalist. The rise of, but the biggest threat is not that. Biggest threat of capitalism, or what you call it, liberal international order, the biggest threat is coming from the populist and right-wing forces which are emerging uh, not only in the Western country but also in the other countries. For instance, the way you see Trump does not believe in liberal international order. What Trump has said that the biggest threat to American supremacy is European Union. European Union, he considers European Union to be the biggest threat to American dominance, and as a consequence, he is questioning the very idea of European Union, which promoted what he called liberal international order. The shared sovereignty, common space, the idea of common trade, common foreign policy, human rights, democracy, these broader ideas which were being championed by European Union. Now, the biggest power, the biggest beneficiary of the system, which is United States, United States is questioning the very idea of European Union. US is not happy, Trump is not happy with Macron. Trump is not happy with Starmer's policy. And Trump is not happy with many of the European Union's policy, and that's why European Union was also put under tariff, 20-25% tariff, and they're negotiating and they're trying to strike a deal. The second important feature, the crisis, as you see, that international trade was the backbone of what we call liberal international order. Without international trade, it didn't matter. Why would you travel to United States? Why would United States take people from India and Ghana if there is no trade, if there is no exchange of ideas and goods and services? So remember that liberal international order, it rested on the idea of capitalism. It rested on the idea of international trade. But the biggest, the beneficiary, the country which championed the idea of liberal international order, United States, is withdrawing from that order. Trump has clearly said that he does not believe in the rules of the WTO. What Trump is doing, Trump is negotiating with each and every country individually. The way some a bully of your village will negotiate not with together, but they will negotiate separately with each and every individual. So similarly, Trump is saying that you come and negotiate, but I don't believe in the multilateral negotiation of the WTO. I don't believe in what you call the idea of United Nations being the most important organization. Trump has withdrawn from WHO. Trump has withdrawn from climate change. Now Trump has withdrawn from UNICEF. So United Nations was created primarily by United States. Now what is happening? That US is gradually withdrawing from all the institutions of United States. Right? So that's the major challenge of what you call liberal international order. And sadly, as I said, it is not necessarily coming from outside. Outside concerns are there, but major threat to liberal international order is coming from the core, which is United States and Europe. What is happening in Europe, for instance? In France, you have Marine Le Pen, as the leader, right-wing party. This AfD party, the right-wing party in Germany, you have Reform Party, which in UK. Hungary is already very different from other European countries. Many Slovenia, etc. It pursues a very different kind of policy. Right-wing forces are becoming extremely powerful in France, in Germany, also in Italy. You already have in Italy the Prime Minister who is a very right-wing, hardcore person. So right-wing forces are challenging the very idea of liberal international order and the idea of liberalism, and that is, in my view, is the biggest threat to what you call liberal international order. Also, the threats are coming from authoritarian leaders like Xi Jinping and Putin. What they are saying, Putin in his interview a few years back to Financial Times, he clearly says that he does not believe in the liberal international order. And he gave a big interview because he thinks that liberal international ideas, they are used against, they are used to justify intervention. They are used for regime change. They are used for military intervention in Iran, in Ukraine, etc. So they are very critical of the liberal international order. But there is a caveat here. The caveat here is that they believe in trade liberalism. Both China and Russia, they would support trade liberalism. But when it comes to political liberalism, they are very unhappy about it. They say they don't agree to the Western idea of democracy, the Western idea of human rights, and rule of law, etc. So those are, these are the reasons why I believe that liberal international order is fading away. You can ask me the question whether it will completely disappear or not later, but let me tell you that liberal international order is certainly much weaker compared to what you saw just a few years back. And what is happening that hyper-nationalism, be it the case of Japan, Turkey, India, Iran, number of countries, what you see is hyper-nationalism and anti-immigration sentiment is becoming strong, right? What is being said in Delhi, in other places, that Bengalis are being targeted, Bengalis are being identified. So anti-immigration sentiment is being in India, in Europe also the same thing is happening. And also if you go to United States, ICE, you know the ICE, the Immigration Control Authority. So that ICE has become very active, and there is a protest in California, which is a green state, democratic state. But in many other places, that what Trump did, despite his friendship with Prime Minister Modi, that Trump sent some of the Indians in, chained in a military aircraft to India, and that became a huge diplomatic disaster for India, right? And so anti-immigration sentiment has become very strong, and that's a massive challenge to liberal international order. Liberal international order promoted what? Liberal international order promoted not just the trade of goods and services, but it also promoted the idea of exchange of people, right? So labor migration became an important feature. Nearly 1 crore people of India are working in West Asia, countries of West Asia. Number of people went to United States and Britain, Australia, etc. But now is going to be a challenge. So you will have to, unfortunately, you are living in a period, then you will have to build your career primarily in India, because other countries are not very forthcoming, be it Australia, UK. So think of India as your the place where you have to live and prosper. Or I'm not saying that the immigration will not happen. Immigration will continue to happen, but the model of immigration is going to be very different in the coming years. What would be the model of immigration? It would be more like Dubai and Jeddah kind of migration, where you go, work, and come back home. You getting me? Go, work, earn money, and come back. So that should be the model. That was not the case with US earlier. People used to go, study, work, and settle, and then be citizens there. That was the whole idea. But unfortunately, the citizenship laws are going to be very, very strict in the coming years. In India, that is happening. In US, in European countries, everywhere that is happening. Let me give you some, because you might question me, these are all your ideas, but let me bring some scholars who have worked on the liberal international order. Ian Bremmer, he is a very well-known Eurasianist. He works on Eurasia, but he is a very well-known scholar, and you might have seen him on YouTube or some of the interviews also in India. So he says that US is unwinding its global order. The global order that existed till now, so US itself is unwinding. So it's kind of withdrawing from the global order. There is a gradual withdrawal from multilateral organizations, and I've already said how US is withdrawing from number of institutions. US is, and very interesting, what he says is US is the principal driver of unpredictability and crisis. US is the principal driver of that, because why? Because UN is not working, US is not cooperating with the United Nations Security Council. UN is, this WHO is not working because US is not cooperating. WTO, which used to make laws for trade, now because US is not appointing dispute judges, so WTO has become ineffective. Climate change, US has withdrawn, so those negotiations are not happening. So as a consequence, US has become the principal driver of unpredictability and crisis. And US policy, both in Ukraine and in the case of Gaza, as you know, it's extremely problematic, because NATO supported, till Biden, NATO supported Ukraine, and Ukraine was fighting a proxy war for the West just because it had the backing of United States and European countries. But Trump comes to power, and Trump decides to change his policy, and that has led to a crisis where Ukraine is nowhere. Ukraine does not know what kind of policy is going to pursue, and Russia is constantly attacking Ukraine, and Ukraine is not in position to defend itself. And Trump is extremely unpredictable. One day he'll support Putin, second day he'll say something against Putin. He said Putin is crazy recently. Earlier he said Putin is a very smart politician. So what is happening that US has become a factor for that unpredictability in the international system. J.D. Vance, the vice president, he once made this remark in a speech in Europe. When he was giving a speech in Europe, he said this: the biggest problem inside Europe is the woke mind liberal virus. So he is attacking liberalism while giving a speech in Europe. And he refused to meet the German chancellor, and he does not have very good ties with Macron. Macron recently identified, Macron said that the France will identify Palestine as an independent state. But so there is a conflict there, because France considers itself a power of a continental power, European power, but that is not liked by United States. United States would like both Germany and France to be a subordinate power, and France is not agreeing to that, and that leads to conflict. And this rise of patriot and right-wing parties, Marine Le Pen, AfD, Reform Party, etc. So that has become a challenge for the European liberalism, and Trump believes a weak Europe is in the US interest. And Trump thinks that if the European Union is strong, so that is a threat to American dominance. Recently, what he says, that he would like to take the Greenland from Denmark, right? And he has not denied that he will not use military for that. So if that kind of politics is being pursued, so Trump is one of the major factors for unpredictability in international politics today, and nobody can deny. And Ian Bremmer, who is American himself, he also says that. Now, another scholar called Fareed Zakaria, all of you know him. So what are his arguments about the post-American world? That's the name of the title of the book. And the title of the book is called Post-American World. So he is not saying post-Western, he is saying post-American world. And this book came in 2008, where these are the arguments, where it says that while the United States will remain powerful, the relative dominance of the US is declining as other nations rise. So he says that US will remain important, but since other countries are becoming powerful, so the relative power of United States will decline in international politics. And he says this is not about the fall of America, but about the rise of the rest. So this is not so much about the fall of America. America might continue to grow with 1 to 2%, but other countries are rising faster than America, and that's a challenge for America and the Western countries. This shift will lead to a multipolar world. The US still has unmatched military, economic, and cultural power. However, its ability to unilaterally shape the world event is diminishing. And here's a point when he says that he cannot ensure compliance in today's context. For instance, Trump is expecting compliance in trade, compliance in other policies. But let me tell you that he, as a as a superpower, this he could have expected compliance in a different way had US been that powerful the way it was 20 years back. But now US is not in position. Let me tell you, 20 years back, Russia was not in position to even think of attacking Ukraine. But why did Russia decide to attack Ukraine today? Because Russia is certain of one thing, that US will not get directly involved in Ukraine conflict. Had Russia known that US might get militarily involved, Russia would never have attacked Ukraine the way it did in 2014 or the way it did now. So what does it show? That it shows that multipolar world is already there. You need to just observe it in a different way. So the US power is already declining. US is not in position to send its troop to Iran. What US did, it decided to bomb Iran and run away rather than sending forces there. The way it did in Iraq 20 years back, US is not in position to do that. There's a lot of resistance even within the MAGA camp, Make America Great Again, Trump's camp, against American intervening in Iran. People are saying that what did you achieve by bombing Iran? People are saying that Iran is in position to again make the nuclear bomb in next few months. So you have done no damage, but you changed the policy. MAGA came, Trump came by saying that he will not intervene in the conflicts in Middle East, in West Asia. But Trump decided to change because Trump wanted credit for decimating Iran. Netanyahu was becoming too powerful, and he thought this is the opportunity to support Netanyahu and continue his influence in Saudi Arabia and other places. So that's why Trump decided. So what I'm trying to say that the shift, the multipolar shift has already taken place, and many of the regional powers, many of the powers are becoming extremely important in today's context, and that's one of the reasons why I argue that multipolar world is already here. The US has unmatched, economic power is shifting eastward. China's rapid industrialization and global investment, and India's democratic dynamism and technical growth, that is contributing to the rise of rest, according to Fareed Zakaria. Global governance needs reform. He argues that the global institutions are not representative, be it IMF, be it World Bank, be it United Nations Security Council. So these institutions are not representative. As a consequence, there is a need for reforming these institutions, and it's a common argument, and all of you know that how India has been arguing for it for a very long time. America's internal challenges are bigger threat than external ones. And this is the same kind of argument that the way right-wing politics or the MAGA politics is taking over America, so that is a bigger threat to American influence in the international politics. That's the argument of Fareed Zakaria in the book, The Post-American World. The American world, and very interesting point that he says that the post-American world will not be anti-American. Let's not confuse with the two concepts. Post-American does not mean that people will start hating America. There will be people in India, Turkey, Iran who will still like to go to America, who will still like to work in America. So it does not mean that post-American world is necessarily anti-American world. Yes, some other people may dislike it for ideological reasons, for cultural reasons, but do not think that post-American world is anti-American world. It does not mean the same thing. So those are the arguments of Fareed Zakaria. I'll give you one more scholar here, and then probably we can stop and go for break, lunch, whatever. So Oliver Stenkel is a Brazilian scholar, a German origin, German-Brazilian scholar, and he has written a book called Post-Western World. That's the title of the book. So it exactly fits into the title that I've been given to speak on. So Oliver Stenkel, Brazilian scholar, post-Western world. This book came in 2016, Polity Press. And here are the arguments, and his arguments are slightly different from the previous arguments which have been made by the scholars. So what are his arguments? He says, number one, there is a false understanding that rules today are purely Western. So he says that many of the people believe that the world is completely Western. Today's world is Western. So he argues that even that idea is a very Eurocentric idea. To believe that the world is Western is to deny the role of China, India, Brazil, etc., which already these countries are playing very powerful role in the global governance. But when you believe that this is a Western world, so that means you are denying agency to these countries, which is a very Eurocentric and not a post-colonial argument. And he says that, again, you have to be careful that by creating new institutions like BRICS or EII or Shanghai Cooperation Organization, etc., China is imitating, China is mimicking the US style of leadership. So what he's trying to say is very interesting, that do not think that when other countries become powerful, be it India, China, Brazil, so they will behave very different from the way United States behaved in the past. So to believe that the world would be democratic and much better in terms of respecting human rights and the human rights and political and civic rights of people, so that might be a mistake, because China is behaving exactly the way US did 20 years back. So rather than, and also he argues that rather than directly confronting the liberal international order, China will continue to support them. China will continue to support IMF, World Bank, United Nations Security Council, but again it will try to carve out a space for itself, more space for itself. So that is the kind of policy that China is going to pursue in the coming years. He argues that emerging powers like India, China, etc., they agree with fundamental issues of global governance today. What are the fundamental issues? Sovereignty is important, cooperative security is important, democratic community has to remain, collective problem solving, they do believe in that. They also believed in the idea of rule of law. On the idea of democracy, although Stenkel writes, but in my view, China and Russia, they do not agree to the idea of democracy. But otherwise, what he argues is that most of the emerging countries, they do subscribe to some of the liberal international order ideas of sovereignty, cooperation, some of the institutions, they do agree to that. So to say that liberal international order will completely disappear because of the emerging powers, so that might not be true. That's the argument of Stenkel. Non-Western states' skepticism towards liberal international order is more not about the values, but about operationalization. The way liberal international institutions, they pursue the idea, or the way America, for instance, implement the ideas of liberal international order, that according to Stenkel is problematic. The challenge from the non-West is emerging because American intervention in Iraq, Afghanistan, or Syria, etc., so that has led to these countries opposing liberal international order. Otherwise, they agree to international trade, they agree to many of the institutions, especially Russia and China, because they are members of many of the institutions. They are very powerful members, United Nations Security Council. They play important role also in the IMF, World Bank, etc. So they are going to remain with these institutions, but again, they will do two things. One is that they'll create alternative institutions and try to carve out more space for themselves. So that's the argument of Oliver Stenkel so far as international institutions are concerned. So rising states of the non-West are beneficiary of the liberal international order, and they do not necessarily seek to disrupt it. China grew during the liberal international order. India started growing fast during the liberal international order. So do not expect that all these countries are going to jettison, abandon the liberal international order and try to create a new order. So hegemons mean United States. Hegemons are never constrained by rules. They always find escape route when it comes to liberal international order. The challenge to liberal international order has emerged because hegemon has never followed the rule of law, and especially the United States. United States will talk about democracy, about the rule of law, but the current order, according to Eikenberry, all of you know the scholar here, John Eikenberry, who has written a book, Liberal Leviathan, he says that the current world order is a hierarchical order with liberal characteristics. What is the hierarchy? For instance, 5 countries, United Nations Security Council, very powerful, and they will make the laws for global peace and stability. G7, a group of 7, they'll make the laws for what you call economic order. So there is a hierarchy. They talk about democracy, but in international politics, there is no democracy. There is no equal distribution of power. What you see in international politics is a hierarchical order with some liberal characteristics. What are the liberal characteristics? Liberal characteristics are that they respect the sovereignty. Every country, sovereign country, will have a membership, a right to vote, etc., in the UN General Assembly. But again, the hierarchy is created in the same assembly when you create the United Nations Security Council. So it's a hierarchical order with liberal features. Rising powers also looking for exceptionalism. For instance, US American exceptionalism. That's the term being used by Trump all the time. So the liberal internationalism has moved to what you call American exceptionalism today. But unfortunately, China will also seek Chinese exceptionalism in the coming years. Brazil will also talk about regional exceptionalism in the coming years. So many of the countries, emerging powers, are going to imitate, mimic the world order that they have seen in the past. That's what the argument of Oliver Stunkel. Western influence will continue because the rest is not so cohesive. He says that Western countries will continue to play the divide and rule. They'll continue to exert some power in the coming days because of what you call, the rest is not so cohesive. For instance, if you compare China, Russia, India, Brazil, South Africa, economically there is huge disparity. South African economy is roughly $300 billion. Indian economy is much bigger. Chinese economy is 16 to 20 trillion dollar. So there is one is communist country, India is democracy, South Africa is democracy, Russia is an authoritarian state. So you have a very diverse kind of polity, and the cohesion which should happen in the rest, that is not happening. And that's why I said that when you use non-West as a category, analytical category, so this is the major challenge. How do you create a category to analyze when there is so much of discrepancy, so much of division, so much of conflict, and so much of disunity in the analytical category? So that becomes a challenge. West can still be identified by what Edward Said said, or by what you consider broadly G7 countries, by what you consider liberal democracies. But that kind of analytical conceptualization is not possible for the rest, because these countries are completely diverse. There is no territorial contiguity. There is no history which is shared. There is no, political system is completely different. History, culture is completely different. So how do you create a category from the global south or the non-Western countries when these countries are so diverse? So that's what we need to, that's the challenge for theorization. So anybody who is trying to theorize global south, let me tell you that you have to theorize global south in terms of as a geopolitical concept, as a cultural concept, rather than a territorial or broadly theoretical concept. In my interview of Professor Sipser, my interview happened for Professor very recently, and there were two experts, one from BHU, one from Mumbai University. So they asked me on this concept, what is Global South? And they asked me, so I said, Global South is not a territorial concept. Global South is a geopolitical and cultural concept. And I said that how it emerged from the Brandt Commission and earlier, where it was divided on the basis of per capita income. So the northern country, global north, they had a higher per capita income of 15,000 and above. The global southern country, they had a per capita income of 1,000, 2,000, less than. So division was essentially per capita income, what you called that time global south. So it was, so global south is not a category which can easily be conceptualized, which can easily be used as an analytical category. That you need to keep in mind. Now we can take a break, and then I'll touch upon Amitabh Acharya and other scholars, and then also about Indian narrative of what you call it, non-West, etc.
So now there is a 50-minute tea break. After that, we will begin the next session. Thank you.